I caught my fiancé hooking up with my best friend's girlfriend hours before our wedding. When I confronted him, he smirked and said, "Relax. It was just physical. You're overreacting like always. Stop being so dramatic and insecure." So, I taught them both what real consequences look like when you humiliate the wrong person. I found my fiancé with his pants down in his parents' library, wrapped around my best friend's girlfriend, exactly 14 hours before our wedding. "Maya, wait," Ethan started, scrambling off the antique desk. "It's not what it looks like," Vanessa added, pulling her dress down. I stood there, hands still on the doorknob, my brain cataloging the scene the way it would catalog a trauma case in the OR. Disheveled clothes. Lipstick smeared. The smell of her perfume saturating the air. Behind me, I heard Jordan's sharp intake of breath. He'd followed me upstairs looking for them too. For exactly 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Ethan said the words that would define everything that came after. "Relax. It was just physical. You're overreacting like always. Stop being so dramatic and insecure. Just physical. Like that made it better." I'm Dr. Maya Hartwell, and this is the story of how I caught my fiancé hooking up with my best friend's girlfriend hours before our wedding, and what I did about it. But to understand how I got to that library door, how I ended up standing there watching my entire future disintegrate in real time, you need to understand who I was before that moment. You need to understand the life I'd built on precision and control. At 31, I was the youngest attending orthopedic trauma surgeon in Metropolitan General's 100-year history. That wasn't luck. That was 70-hour weeks, sleeping in on-call rooms more nights than my own bed, and an ability to compartmentalize emotion that my mentor Dr. Patricia Chen once called surgical detachment bordering on supernatural. I took it as a compliment. My world revolved around absolutes. Clean incisions. Steady hands. Lives saved in the OR where chaos had no place. I reconstructed shattered spines, rebuilt crushed pelvises from highway accidents, gave people back their ability to walk. Every surgery was a puzzle with a solution. Every broken bone had a protocol for repair. Every crisis had a step-by-step response that I'd memorized and perfected. Control was everything. Control was survival. 3 days before I found Ethan and Vanessa in that library, I'd spent 11 hours reconstructing a motorcycle accident victim's pelvis. 14 surgical pins. 4 shattered vertebrae. Arterial damage that should have killed him twice over. My hands never shook. Not once. Not when the arterial spray hit my face shield at 3:47 a.m. Not when he coded on the table and we had to shock him back. Not when my attending asked if I needed a break after hour 8 and I said no. I didn't need breaks. I needed control. That's what made me exceptional at my job. That's what earned me respect from colleagues twice my age. That's what made patients trust me with their lives. And that's what made me completely blind to the fractures forming in my own life. I met Ethan Callaway 4 years ago at a medical technology conference in Chicago. I was there for a panel on innovative spinal fusion techniques. He was there representing Callaway Pharmaceuticals, his family's third-generation pharmaceutical distribution empire. Representing mostly meant showing up to events with his last name on the building and looking good in expensive suits. We were sitting through some tedious keynote about surgical robotics when he leaned over and whispered, "You look like you'd rather be anywhere but here." I'd smiled despite myself. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who feels exactly the same way. Something about the way he said it, conspiratorial, amused, genuine, made me actually laugh. For the first time in months, I genuinely laughed. Ethan had that effortless charm that came from never worrying about money, never stressing about job security, never lying awake at night wondering if he were good enough. Everything in his life had been easy. Handed to him. Expected. I thought that would be a problem. That we were too different. But Ethan seemed fascinated by my work. He'd ask about my surgeries with actual interest, show up at hospital fundraisers and introduce me as Dr. Maya Hartwell, the brilliant surgeon, with real pride in his voice. When trauma calls interrupted our dinners, he'd just smile and say, "Go save lives," like it was the most natural thing in the world. After years of dating men who resented my career, who complained that I worked too much, who wanted me smaller and more available and less consumed by something they didn't understand, Ethan felt like oxygen after being underwater. He never complained when I canceled plans for emergency surgeries. Never made me feel guilty for missing his company events. Never asked me to choose between him and my career. I thought that meant he accepted me. All of me. The parts other people found difficult. His mother Catherine felt differently. I met her 6 months into our relationship at a formal dinner at their country estate. The kind of place with more rooms than residents, where staff served 5 courses like they were performing delicate surgical procedures themselves. Catherine Calloway looked at me across the antique dining table and said in a voice like frosted glass, "A surgeon. How industrious." Ethan's previous girlfriends came from more established families. The Vanderbilts, the Astors, you understand. Translation: You're not good enough for my son. Ethan had laughed it off later. She'll warm up once she realizes how brilliant you are. He never did. But 3 years in, Ethan proposed anyway. With his grandmother's ring, a flawless 3-carat diamond that probably cost more than my medical school debt. We were at the cabin his family owned upstate, standing on the dock at sunset, and when he got down on one knee I said yes without hesitation. I said yes to a future I thought I understood. The wedding was set for March 22nd. We had 8 months to plan. Plenty of time for everything to fall perfectly into place. That's when my best friend Jordan Bishop started dating Vanessa Crane. Jordan and I had been inseparable since undergrad anatomy labs. We'd bonded over cadaver dissections and late-night study sessions and shared dreams of careers that actually mattered. He became a civil rights attorney, the kind who took cases for justice instead of money, who worked 80-hour weeks defending people who couldn't afford proper representation. He understood what it meant to be consumed by work that felt like purpose. When he called me after meeting Vanessa at an art gallery opening, his voice had that dopey excitement that told me he was genuinely smitten. "She's incredible, Maya. Smart, sophisticated, passionate about art." I was happy for him. Jordan deserved someone who made him light up like that. Vanessa Crane was stunning in that effortless way some women are. Long dark hair that always looked professionally styled. Vintage designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. A Yale art history degree she mentioned in every single conversation like it was a fundamental part of her identity. She worked as a private art consultant, which as far as I could tell meant rich people paid her obscene amounts to validate their taste in paintings. Our first double date should have been a warning sign. Vanessa spent 20 minutes explaining why the restaurant's decor was aggressively pedestrian and lacking any cohesive aesthetic vision whatsoever. I told Jordan afterward as gently as possible, "She's a bit much." He'd smiled that love-struck smile. "She's just passionate. Give her a chance." So I did. Over the next 8 months, the 4 of us became inseparable. Weekend trips upstate. Thursday dinners when I wasn't on call. Endless wedding planning sessions where Vanessa inserted herself as my unofficial co-coordinator. She had opinions about everything. My dress was too traditional. You need something with more drama. My venue was beautiful but predictable. My decision to keep working right up until the wedding week would leave me looking exhausted in all the photos. I should have seen the other warning signs too. The way Vanessa touched Ethan's arm during conversations, her hand lingering just a beat too long. How she'd lean in close when making points, invading personal space that should have stayed personal. The inside jokes they developed that somehow excluded Jordan and me from our own gatherings. But I was busy, consumed by my surgical schedule, grateful for help with wedding planning that I thought came from genuine friendship. 2 weeks before the wedding, a multi-vehicle pileup on the interstate filled my schedule completely. I was operating 12-14 hours a day, coming home at midnight, leaving again at 5 in the morning, running on caffeine and muscle memory. Vanessa suggested she and Ethan handle last-minute vendor confirmations together. "You're too busy," she'd insisted, her face full of concern that seemed completely genuine. "Let us help. That's what friends are for." I'd been so grateful I'd hugged her. I'd spent 12 years training myself to ignore instinct in favor of observable data. To trust protocols over gut feelings. To believe that emotion clouded judgment and control created safety. That same training made me blind to the affair happening right in front of me. While I was in the reconstructing strangers' shattered spines, they were busy constructing something else entirely. A betrayal that would fracture my carefully controlled life beyond anything I could have anticipated. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be intimate. Family and close friends at the Calloway estate. Maybe 50 people total. Catherine had other ideas. 200 guests. Full catering staff. A string quartet. The kind of event that made my parents look small and uncomfortable in their best clothes, probably thinking about the retirement savings they'd liquidated to contribute to a spectacle they couldn't afford and didn't understand. I was looking for Ethan after dinner, wanting to steal a quiet moment before tomorrow's chaos, when I found Jordan on the terrace looking worried. "Have you seen Vanessa?" he asked. "She said she was going to the bathroom 30 minutes ago." Something in his voice carried weight beyond the words. "Where's Ethan?" he asked quietly. My stomach dropped. We both knew. On some level we'd both known for weeks, maybe months. But knowing and acknowledging are different things entirely. That's how we ended up walking through the Callaway estate together, checking rooms, following an instinct neither of us wanted to trust. That's how we ended up outside the library door. That's how we ended up standing there watching our entire lives shatter in the span of 3 seconds. And that's when Ethan said those words, "Relax. It was just physical. You're overreacting like always. Stop being so dramatic and insecure. Just physical." Like reducing betrayal to biology somehow made it acceptable. Like 6 months of lying to my face was justified because there was no emotional component. Like I was the problem for discovering them instead of them being the problem for the affair itself. In that moment, standing in that doorway with Jordan's breathing harsh behind me and Vanessa's lipstick smeared across Ethan's collar, I felt my surgical detachment activate completely. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't break. I looked at them both and asked the only question that mattered. "How long? How long?" I asked again when neither of them answered. Ethan was still fumbling with his belt, face flushed red, not with shame but with something closer to anger. Vanessa had managed to smooth her dress down, but her lipstick was smeared across her chin and her hair looked like someone had been running their hands through it. Which, of course, someone had. "Does it matter?" Ethan shot back, his voice taking on that defensive edge I'd heard before when I'd questioned him about working late or needing space. "You're never around anyway. Always at the hospital. Always choosing your patients over me. My patients. The people whose lives I saved. The work I'd dedicated 12 years of my life to perfecting." He was using that as justification. Behind me, Jordan's breathing had gone harsh and uneven. "Vanessa," he said quietly, his voice shaking. "How long have you been sleeping with him?" Vanessa's eyes darted between Jordan and Ethan, calculating which answer would cause less damage. She'd always been good at reading rooms, at knowing exactly what to say to manage situations. But there was no managing this. "It just happened," she started, her voice taking on that pleading quality. "We didn't plan it. It was a mistake." "How long?" Jordan's voice cracked on the second word. Vanessa and Ethan exchanged a look. A whole conversation passed between them in that glance. Some agreement about what to admit, what to hide, how much truth they could get away with revealing. That look told me everything I needed to know before Vanessa even opened her mouth. 6 months, she whispered. The number hung in the air like smoke. 6 months. Half the time I'd been planning this wedding. Half the time I'd been choosing flowers and finalizing seating charts and writing vows to a man who was sleeping with someone I'd called my friend. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound came out sharp and brittle, echoing off the library's high ceilings. "You think this is funny?" Ethan's face went from flushed to purple. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're completely unhinged." "I'm unhinged," I repeated slowly, tasting the words. "I just walked in on you having sex with my best friend's girlfriend 14 hours before our wedding, and I'm the one who's unhinged. It was just physical." He was yelling now, panic making his voice go high. "It didn't mean anything. You're taking this way too seriously. Just physical. Like that was supposed to comfort me. Like reducing 6 months of betrayal to mere biology somehow made it acceptable. So if it didn't mean anything," I said, my voice still perfectly calm, "why did you keep doing it? 6 months isn't a mistake, Ethan. That's a choice. Made over and over again." Vanessa was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. "Maya, please, you have to understand." "I don't have to understand anything." I looked at her directly for the first time. "You were supposed to be my friend. I am your friend. Friends don't sleep with their friend's fiancé 50 times over 6 months. The number was a guess, but I watched her face and knew I'd hit close to the truth. Or was it more than that? Did you lose count? She flinched like I'd slapped her. Jordan made that sound again, that wounded animal noise that told me he was breaking apart inside. 50 times. His voice was barely audible. You slept with him 50 times? Jordan, baby, please. Vanessa reached for him. He stepped back like she was radioactive. Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me. We need to talk about this privately, Vanessa tried, her eyes darting toward the open door. Before people find out. Oh, people are going to find out, I said, pulling my phone from my clutch. In fact, let's tell them right now. Don't you dare. Ethan lunged for my phone. I sidestepped him easily. 12-hour surgeries had taught me to move efficiently even when exhausted, and he stumbled forward into the desk they'd just been using for their encounter. Vanessa tried to catch him and they both went down in a tangle of limbs. An antique lamp crashed to the floor, shattering. The sound was catastrophic in the quiet house. For a moment, everything froze. Then I heard it, footsteps in the hallway. Multiple footsteps. People running toward the noise. Ethan scrambled to his feet, eyes wide with genuine panic now. Mother's going to. He didn't finish the sentence because Catherine Calloway appeared in the doorway, her practiced social smile already in place. What on earth? She stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes swept the scene with the precision of someone trained to assess situations quickly and thoroughly. Me standing calm by the door. Jordan pale and shaking beside me. Ethan and Vanessa on the floor surrounded by broken glass. The overturned furniture. Vanessa's smeared makeup. Ethan's disheveled clothes. The smile vanished from Catherine's face. Someone better explain this immediately, she said, her voice dropping to that dangerous quiet tone that was somehow more terrifying than yelling. More people crowded into the hallway behind her. I recognized Ethan's father, several groomsmen, my parents pushing through the crowd looking confused and concerned. Bridesmaids in their cocktail dresses. The wedding planner with her ever-present clipboard. Random guests drawn by the crash. All eyes on us. Ethan scrambled to his feet, panic replacing whatever arrogance he'd had moments ago. Mother, it's not. Maya's having some kind of breakdown. She attacked us. I haven't touched either of you, I said calmly, holding up my hands to show the crowd. Though I'm tempted to start. Then why are we on the floor? Vanessa demanded, also standing now, trying to fix her hair with shaking hands. Because your coordination is as bad as your judgment, I replied. You tripped over each other trying to stop me from making a phone call. What phone call? Catherine's eyes were sharp, missing nothing. I smiled. It felt strange on my face, cold and hard and nothing like the smiles I'd practiced for wedding photos. The one where I call my maid of honor and tell her to cancel the wedding, I said clearly, loudly enough for everyone in the hallway to hear. Because the groom has been sleeping with one of the bridesmaids for 6 months. The hallway exploded. Gasps. Shocked whispers. Someone said, "Oh my God," loud enough to echo. I saw phone screens lighting up as people started recording, texting, calling others who weren't there to witness this firsthand. That's not true. Ethan's voice went high and panicked. She's lying. She's jealous and controlling and making things up because she can't handle. If I'm lying, I interrupted, my voice cutting through his rambling. Why is Vanessa's lipstick smeared all over your collar? Every head in the hallway turned to look at Ethan's collar. The evidence was undeniable. Red lipstick, the exact shade Vanessa always wore, smeared across the white fabric. And why are there scratch marks on your neck? I continued, cataloging the evidence the way I would in a medical chart. More gasps. More phones raised to capture the moment. And why does this entire room smell like her perfume? Catherine's eyes narrowed dangerously. She looked at her son, really looked at him, and I saw the moment she registered everything I'd pointed out. Her expression transformed from practiced social grace to something volcanic. Ethan James Calloway. She used his full name like a weapon. Is this true? The crowd had gone completely silent. Everyone waiting. Phones recording. This moment crystallizing into something that would be replayed and discussed and dissected for months, maybe years. Ethan's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. His resolve was crumbling. I could see it happening in real time. The panic taking over, the realization that he couldn't lie his way out of this, that too many people had seen too much evidence. It just happened, he finally said, his voice weak. She came on to me. The hallway erupted again. Vanessa spun on him so fast her heel caught on the Persian rug. I came on to you? Her voice was shrill, mascara-streaked face twisted with rage and disbelief. You pursued me. Vanessa, don't. Ethan reached for her arm. She yanked it away. Don't touch me. You said Maya was cold. You said she cared more about her career than you. You said the wedding was a mistake, but you couldn't back out because of your family. Every word landed like a physical blow. My parents were in the hallway now. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth. My father's face had gone dangerously red. That's not, I never said. Ethan was floundering, looking between his mother and the growing crowd of witnesses. You said it last week. Vanessa was fully crying now, her careful composure completely shattered. At your condo. After we... She stopped, realizing mid-sentence what she was admitting. Jordan made that sound again. Last week? You were at his condo last week. I'd been in Boston last week. At a medical conference presenting spinal fusion research. I'd called Ethan every single night from my hotel room, and he'd said he missed me, that he was bored at home, that he couldn't wait for the wedding. He'd been with her. The timeline reconstruction was happening in my head automatically, the way it did when I was piecing together how an accident had occurred based on injury patterns. How many times? Jordan's voice broke on the question. How many times total? Vanessa's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. How many? Jordan asked again, louder this time. I don't know, she whispered. Maybe 40? 50? I lost count. The crowd gasped again, louder this time. Someone in the back was definitely recording. I could see the distinctive glow of a phone screen aimed directly at us. 50 times over 6 months? I kept my voice even, clinical, letting the mathematics speak for themselves. That's twice a week. That's not it just happened. That's a relationship. The word hung there in the air. Relationship. Reframing everything Ethan had called just physical into something deliberate, ongoing, chosen repeatedly over half a year. Ethan tried to backtrack immediately. It wasn't like that, he stammered, looking at his mother with genuine fear in his eyes. She's exaggerating. I'm exaggerating? Vanessa turned on him so fast I actually saw the moment her survival instinct kicked in. The decision to throw him under the bus before he could do it to her. You told me you loved me. Complete silence. The kind of silence where you could hear people's shocked breathing, the rustle of expensive fabric as 200 guests leaned forward to hear better. Catherine's face went absolutely white. You told her what? I didn't. That's not, she's twisting my words. Ethan was spiraling, his carefully constructed life falling apart in real time. You said you were going to call off the wedding. Vanessa was fully committed to her confession now, tears streaming down her face, mascara leaving black tracks. You said we'd be together. You said Maya didn't understand you, that she was married to her job, that you felt alone even when you were with her. Each word hit like a scalpel cutting through tissue. I should have felt something. Pain maybe. Betrayal. Rage. Instead, I felt that same surgical detachment settling over me like a familiar coat. My brain was cataloging everything clinically. The growing crowd, the phones recording, the way Ethan's father had gone dangerously red in the face, how my mother was gripping my father's arms so hard her knuckles had turned white. When? I asked quietly, cutting through Vanessa's sobbing. When did he tell you he loved you? Vanessa looked at me, then at Jordan, then back at Ethan like she was hoping he'd step in and stop this. He didn't. He just stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. 2 months ago, Vanessa finally whispered. Right after we spent the weekend at his family's cabin. The cabin. The piece of information landed differently than everything else. The cabin was where Ethan and I had spent our first anniversary. Where he'd proposed on the dock at sunset. Where we talked about bringing our future children someday. 2 months ago, I repeated slowly, my mind automatically calculating. I was in Boston 2 months ago. At a medical conference. Presenting research on spinal fusion techniques. Calling Ethan every night from my hotel room, exhausted but excited to share what I was learning. And he'd said he missed me. Said he was bored at home. Said he couldn't wait for me to get back. He'd been at the cabin. With her. You told me you were staying home that weekend, I said, my voice still eerily calm. You said you had work to catch up on. Ethan's face had gone from red to pale green. Paya, I can explain. Don't bother. I turned to Catherine. How many people know about the cabin? Who else has keys? Catherine understood immediately what I was asking. Whether there would be evidence, witnesses, anything to corroborate what Vanessa was claiming. Just family, she said quietly, her eyes never leaving her son's face. And you. And me, Vanessa added, her voice small. The implication hung in the air. Ethan had given her a key to his family's private retreat. The place that was supposed to be sacred to us, to our relationship, to our future. Jordan made a sound like he was choking. A weekend. His voice shook. You told me you were visiting your sister in Portland that weekend. You sent me pictures of her apartment, the city. Stock photos, I said, the pieces clicking together with horrifying clarity. From the internet. Easy enough to find if you know what to search for. Vanessa's silence confirmed it. How many times? Jordan asked again, his voice breaking completely now. How many times did you sleep with him? Give me a number. Jordan, please. How many times? Vanessa's shoulders slumped in defeat. I don't know exactly. Maybe 40 times? 50? I lost count. The hallway erupted again. Louder this time. Someone's grandmother actually gasped so loudly it echoed off the high ceilings. I saw one of the bridesmaids, Jessica, I think her name was, cover her mouth with both hands. My father took a step forward. 50 times. His voice carried the kind of quiet rage that was somehow more terrifying than yelling. My father was a high school teacher, a gentle man who rarely raised his voice, who'd spent 30 years teaching teenagers with infinite patience. He looked ready to commit violence. Mr. Hartwell, Ethan started. Don't. My father's voice was sharp as a blade. Don't you dare speak to me. My wife and I liquidated our retirement fund for this wedding. We went into debt. Real debt. The kind that keeps you up at night wondering how you'll make mortgage payments. I hadn't known that. They'd never told me exactly how much they'd contributed, just that they wanted to help, that they were proud, that they wanted my day to be perfect. My mother was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Dad, I started. We did it because we thought you'd found someone worthy of you, he continued, still looking at Ethan. Someone who saw how extraordinary you are. Someone who valued the sacrifices you make every single day to save people's lives. Catherine stepped forward, her social mask completely gone now, replaced by something cold and furious. Ethan, tell me right now, is what Dr. Hartwell said true? Have you been carrying on an affair for 6 months? With this woman? She gestured at Vanessa without looking at her. It wasn't an affair, Ethan tried weakly. It was just what? Catherine's voice could have cut glass. Just physical? Just a mistake? Just 50 encounters over 6 months while your fiancé was working 70-hour weeks saving lives. The crowd was massive now. I could see people from downstairs craning their necks to see what was happening, phones out, recording everything. The wedding planner looked like she might faint. The string quartet had actually stopped playing in the ballroom below. Even they'd heard the commotion. Answer your mother, Ethan's father said quietly. He'd been silent until now, but his voice carried absolute authority. Did you have an affair? Ethan looked around desperately, searching for an exit that didn't exist. Every direction showed him faces ranging from shocked to disgusted to pitying. His carefully constructed image was burning down in real time, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Yes, he finally whispered. Louder, his father demanded. Yes. Ethan's voice cracked. Yes, I had an affair. Are you happy now? Is everyone satisfied? Happy. Jordan laughed, and it sounded broken. My girlfriend who I was planning to propose to next month, has been sleeping with my best friend's fiancé for half a year. So no, I'm not particularly happy. That was news to me. Jordan had been planning to propose to Vanessa. I saw his hand go unconsciously to his jacket pocket, where I'd bet money there was a ring box hidden. Vanessa saw it too. Her face crumpled. Jordan, no. Don't. He pulled his hand away from his pocket like it burned. Don't say my name. Don't look at me. Don't. His voice broke completely. I bought a ring 3 months ago. I was waiting for the right moment. I thought. He couldn't finish. The hallway had gone silent again, everyone witnessing Jordan's heartbreak in real time. Catherine turned to me, and for the first time since I'd met her 4 years ago, I saw something like respect in her eyes. Dr. Hartwell, I apologize. You deserved far better than this. Than him. She looked at her son with open disgust. The wedding is cancelled. Immediately. Ethan, you will personally contact every single guest and explain what you've done. You will not make excuses. You will not blame Dr. Hartwell for your choices. Mother. I'm not finished. Her voice was ice. Vanessa, you are no longer welcome in this house or at any Calloway family event. Ever. Both of you have humiliated this family in front of 200 witnesses, and there will be consequences. I watched Ethan's face cycle through emotions. Shock, anger, fear, and finally something that looked like resignation. I'm sorry, he said, but he was looking at his mother, not at me. Of course he was. I turned to the crowd of guests. My family, his family, our friends, colleagues who'd traveled from across the country, people who'd rearranged their lives to be here for what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I apologize for the disruption, I said clearly, my voice steady. But I won't apologize for refusing to marry a man who thinks betrayal is just physical, and that expecting basic loyalty makes me dramatic and insecure. Several people in the crowd actually nodded. The wedding is off, I continued. Thank you all for coming. I'm sorry you traveled for nothing. You didn't travel for nothing, my mother said suddenly, her voice thick with tears but surprisingly strong. You all witnessed Maya standing up for herself. You witnessed her refusing to accept less than she deserves. That's not nothing. Several women in the crowd started clapping. Then more people joined in. Within seconds, half the hallway was applauding. Not for the wedding. For its cancellation. I looked at Jordan. You okay? He shook his head, tears streaming down his face. No. But I will be. He turned to Vanessa one last time. We're done. Don't contact me. Don't come to my apartment. Don't call, don't text, don't send letters or flowers or apologies. I'm blocking you on everything. And Vanessa. He waited until she looked at him. I hope it was worth it. Then he walked away, head held high despite the tears. Everyone in the hallway stepped aside to let him pass. I took one last look at Ethan, standing there in his expensive suit surrounded by broken glass and the ruins of his reputation. Then I walked out. I didn't look back. Behind me, I heard Catherine's voice cutting through the shocked silence. Everyone out. This event is over. Ethan, you and I need to have a very serious conversation. The last thing I heard before I reached the stairs was Vanessa sobbing and Ethan trying to explain himself to his mother. I kept walking. I made it to the main staircase before my legs started shaking. Not from emotion. From adrenaline crash. My body finally catching up to what had just happened, the surgical detachment starting to crack at the edges. I gripped the banister, forcing myself to keep moving. One step. Then another. Behind me, I could still hear voices from the library hallway. Catherine's sharp commands, someone crying, the low murmur of 200 guests processing what they'd just witnessed. My phone was buzzing in my clutch. Probably my maid of honor, probably the wedding coordinator, probably everyone who hadn't been upstairs but had already heard through the grapevine. I ignored it all. The grand foyer was empty when I reached it. Everyone was still upstairs or in the ballroom, drawn to the drama like moths to flame. The silence felt wrong after all that noise, all those voices, all that chaos. My parents found me there, standing alone by the massive front doors. My mother reached me first, pulling me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. She smelled like her usual perfume and something else. The sharp scent of stress sweat that no amount of expensive fragrance could mask. Baby, she whispered into my hair. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't be. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Better now than after. My father's hand landed on my shoulder, heavy and warm. When I looked up at him, his eyes were red-rimmed but dry. We're leaving. Right now. You don't need to stay here another second. The rehearsal dinner is over, he said firmly. Catherine can handle her own mess. We're taking you home. Home. Except home was the apartment I shared with Ethan. The apartment where half my closet held his clothes, where his shaving kit sat on the bathroom counter, where we'd planned to spend one final night before the wedding tomorrow. Tomorrow. The wedding that was supposed to happen in less than 15 hours. I can't go there, I said quietly. Not tonight. My mother pulled back to look at me. Then we'll get a hotel. All three of us. We'll order room service and terrible pay-per-view movies and we'll figure out everything else tomorrow. A hotel. With my parents. The night before my wedding that wasn't happening. The absurdity of it hit me again, but this time I didn't laugh. I just nodded. Okay. We were halfway to the door when I heard footsteps behind us. Fast footsteps. Turn. His face was blotchy, eyes swollen, but he'd stopped crying. He looked hollowed out, like someone had scooped everything vital from inside him and left just the shell. Paya, wait. I stopped. My parents exchanged a look but stepped back slightly, giving us space. I didn't know, Jordan said, his voice rough. I swear to God I didn't know. If I'd had any idea. I know you didn't. And I did know. Jordan's shock had been too genuine, too visceral. You're not responsible for what she did. Neither are you. He said it with such conviction that I felt something crack in my chest. What Ethan said up there, about you being too focused on your career, too intense, too unavailable, that's garbage. You know that, right? Did I know that? 6 months. 50 times. That's a lot of opportunities for someone to feel neglected, to feel like they needed something I wasn't providing. Why? Jordan stepped closer, his voice dropping. You are brilliant and driven and dedicated to saving people's lives. Those aren't character flaws. Those are the things that make you extraordinary. If Ethan couldn't handle being with someone extraordinary, that's his failure. Not yours. My mother made a small sound of agreement behind me. She played me too, Jordan continued. Vanessa. Every Thursday when she said she had yoga class. Every Tuesday when she claimed she was meeting clients. Every time I suggested we do something together and she said she was too busy, too tired, had other plans. He laughed bitterly. I was planning to propose next month. I had the ring in my pocket tonight. I was going to ask her after your wedding, use the romantic atmosphere, make it special. Jordan. I thought she was the one. His voice broke on the last word. I really thought. He couldn't finish. I pulled him into a hug. He held on like I was the only thing keeping him upright, his body shaking with silent sobs. We stood there for a long moment, two people who just had their futures ripped apart by the same two cowards. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were wet but his jaw was set. What are you going to do? Right now. Get a hotel room with my parents. Tomorrow. I took a breath. Tomorrow I'm going home and packing up every single thing that belongs to Ethan. Then I'm changing the locks. Then I'm blocking his number. Then I'm moving forward like he never existed. Jordan nodded slowly. Can I help? You don't have to. I want to. He said it with such fierce conviction that I knew he meant it. I need to do something. Need to feel like I have some control over any of this. I understood that completely. Hey, I said. Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. I'll bring coffee in boxes. My father cleared his throat gently. We should go before anyone else comes down. He was right. The last thing I needed was another confrontation, another round of explanations, another moment standing in this house that smelled like old money and fresh betrayal. We made it to the parking lot before my phone started ringing in earnest. My maid of honor. Then one of my bridesmaids. Then another. Then my cousin. Then colleagues from the hospital who must have heard through some impossible grapevine that traveled faster than light. I turned my phone off completely. Smart, my father said, unlocking his car. You don't owe anyone explanations tonight. We drove in silence to a hotel near the airport, the kind of generic chain that looked identical in every city, where nobody asked questions and nobody cared who you were or why you needed a room at 11 p.m. on a Friday night. My mother handled check-in while my father and I sat in the lobby, not talking, just existing in the same space. I never trusted him, my father said suddenly. I looked at him surprised. You never said anything. What was I going to say? Honey, I have a bad feeling about the rich boy who seems perfect on paper. You would have thought I was being overprotective. Or classist. Or just a dad who thought nobody was good enough for his daughter. Are you? A dad who thinks nobody's good enough. He smiled slightly. Probably. But that's not why I didn't trust Ethan. I didn't trust him because he never looked at you the way you deserve to be looked at. What do you mean? When you talk about your surgeries, about your research, about the lives you've saved, your whole face lights up. You become animated and passionate and so completely yourself. He paused. Ethan never looked at you like that was beautiful. He looked at you like it was something to tolerate. Something he put up with because the rest of the package was acceptable. The observation landed with quiet devastation. Because my father was right. I'd seen that look on Ethan's face dozens of times. That slightly glazed expression when I got too deep into medical terminology, Too excited about a successful surgery, too consumed by work he didn't understand and didn't really care to. I told myself it didn't matter. That not everyone had to be passionate about orthopedic trauma surgery. That it was enough that he didn't actively resent my career the way other boyfriends had. But tolerating something isn't the same as celebrating it. My mother returned with key cards. Room 847. 2 queens and a pull-out couch. We rode the elevator in silence. The room was exactly as generic as I'd expected. Beige walls, floral bedspread, abstract art that meant nothing, the faint smell of industrial cleaning products. It was perfect. My mother ordered room service. Comfort food that none of us really wanted but all of us needed. Grilled cheese sandwiches and French fries and chocolate cake that probably came from a freezer. We ate in our fancy rehearsal dinner clothes, sitting on hotel beds, watching some mindless action movie on cable. Nobody mentioned the wedding. Nobody talked about what happened. Nobody asked if I was okay. We just existed together, my parents flanking me like bodyguards, their mere presence saying everything that needed to be said. Around 1 a.m. my mother finally spoke. "Do you want to talk about it?" I considered the question. Did I want to dissect the affair, analyze where it went wrong, process the betrayal out loud? No, I said honestly. I want to sleep. And tomorrow I want to erase every trace of him from my life. And then I want to go back to work and remember who I am when I'm not defined by who I'm dating. My father raised his water glass. To Maya Hartwell, brilliant surgeon who doesn't need a man to be complete. My mother raised hers too. To our daughter who's always been enough exactly as she is. I raised my glass, feeling something shift inside me. Not healing, it was too soon for that. But the beginning of something. The first stage of reconstructing a life that had been shattered. Some breaks, I thought, require complete demolition before proper reconstruction can begin. Tomorrow I'd start demolishing. Tonight I'd just sleep. I didn't sleep that night in the hotel room. My parents did. My mother's soft snoring from one bed, my father's deeper breathing from the pull-out couch. But I just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind cataloging everything with clinical precision. 50 encounters over 6 months. The cabin where he proposed. It was just physical. You're always so dramatic. Around 4 a.m. I gave up on sleep entirely. Pulled on the hotel robe and sat by the window watching the city lights blur through the glass, thinking about what came next. The wedding was supposed to happen in 10 hours. Guests would be getting ready, putting on their formal wear, heading to the venue. Except there was no venue anymore. No ceremony. No reception. Just 200 people who'd need to be told that everything was cancelled. Catherine had said Ethan would handle the notifications. I wondered if he actually would or if he'd try to spin some story that made him look less pathetic. My phone was still off. I turned it back on just long enough to text my maid of honor. Weddings cancelled. Long story. Okay. We'll explain later. Before shutting it down again. I couldn't handle the influx yet. The questions, the concern, the people who'd want details I didn't have the energy to provide. Jordan showed up at the hotel at 8:30 a.m. with coffee and a rental van. For the boxes, he explained when I met him in the lobby. My parents were still upstairs giving me space. Figured we'd need something bigger than my sedan. The drive to my apartment felt surreal. Saturday morning traffic, people going about their normal weekends, completely unaware that my entire life had detonated less than 12 hours ago. You okay? Jordan asked at a red light. I don't know yet, I said honestly. Ask me in a month. The apartment looked exactly as I'd left it yesterday morning, before the rehearsal dinner, before the discovery, before everything shattered. My coffee mug was still in the sink. Ethan's jacket was draped over the back of the couch. Evidence of a life that no longer existed. Where do we start? Jordan asked. Bedroom, I said. Everything of his goes into boxes. Clothes, toiletries, books, everything. I want it gone. We worked in silence for the first hour. Jordan handled the bathroom while I tackled the closet, pulling Ethan's expensive suits off hangers, folding his designer shirts, packing his shoes into boxes with methodical precision. It should have hurt more than it did. But mostly I just felt numb. Detached. Like I was packing up a stranger's belongings rather than dismantling a 4-year relationship. He's got a lot of stuff, Jordan observed, emerging from the bathroom with a box full of grooming products. For someone who claimed he needed space before the wedding. I looked around the bedroom. He was right. For someone who'd supposedly been staying elsewhere to respect tradition, Ethan had left an enormous amount of his life in my apartment. Almost like he'd never intended to actually move out. Almost like this space excuse was just that. An excuse to maintain his affair without me accidentally discovering it. By noon we'd filled 12 boxes. Everything that belonged to Ethan, packed and sealed and ready to go. What now? Jordan asked. Now we put them in the hallway. The hallway. I'm done being responsible for his belongings. He can come get them himself. Or not. Either way, they're not staying in here. We carried the boxes out one by one, stacking them neatly outside my apartment door. Jordan was sweating by the time we finished. The boxes were heavy, full of the accumulated possessions of someone who'd lived comfortably his entire life. Locks next, I said, pulling out my phone and finally turning it back on. It immediately exploded with notifications. 47 missed calls. 32 text messages. 14 voicemails. Most from Ethan. The texts escalated in desperation. Maya, please answer. We need to talk about this. You're being unreasonable. I made a mistake, but that doesn't mean we can't work through this. I love you. Why are you ignoring me? This is childish. Fine. Be that way. I blocked his number without reading the rest. The locksmith arrived at 1 p.m. Professional, efficient, asking no questions about why a woman needed her locks changed on what was supposed to be her wedding day. $300 and 45 minutes later, I had new keys and Ethan had none. Thank you, I told the locksmith, testing the new lock mechanism. No problem. Stay safe. Something about the way he said it made me think he knew exactly what kind of situation this was. Jordan left around 2, exhausted and emotionally drained. Call me if you need anything, he said at the door. Anything at all. Same to you. After he left, I sat on my couch in the too quiet apartment and finally let myself feel something. Not sadness. Not heartbreak. Rage. Pure surgical rage at the 6 months of lies, at the 50 betrayals, at the casual dismissal of, it was just physical, at being called dramatic and insecure for having the audacity to expect loyalty. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. Dr. Hartwell? A man's voice. Who is this? It's Ethan. I'm calling from my office phone since you blocked me. I hung up immediately. Blocked that number too. 10 minutes later, another unknown number. I didn't answer. Then another. And another. He was cycling through different phones trying to find one I hadn't blocked yet. The desperation would have been pathetic if it wasn't so infuriating. I changed my number entirely. Spent the next 2 hours texting my new contact information to everyone who mattered. My parents, Jordan, my colleagues at the hospital, close friends who deserved to stay in my life. Ethan and Vanessa got left in the digital void. 2 weeks passed. I threw myself into work with an intensity that concerned even my chief of surgery. 12-hour days became 14, became 16. I took every trauma call, every emergency surgery, every case that other attendings didn't want. The OR was the only place that made sense anymore. The only place where broken things could actually be fixed, where my skill mattered, where control and precision saved lives instead of just protected me from feeling too much. My colleagues were kind enough not to ask questions. They'd heard through the grapevine, small hospital, big gossip, and they gave me space to process however I needed to. On day 14, the charge nurse called my extension during a rare break between surgeries. Dr. Hartwell, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. An Ethan Calloway. My hands tightened on the phone. Tell him I'm in surgery. He says he'll wait. Tell him I'm in surgery for the next 8 hours. And if he's still here when I'm done, I'm calling security. Understood. He wasn't there when I finished my shift at 9 p.m. But there was a massive flower arrangement at the nurse's station. 24 red roses, probably $300 worth, ostentatious and desperate. The card read, I'm sorry. Please give me another chance. Melissa, one of the veteran nurses, looked at me with sympathy. Want these, Dr. Hartwell? God no. They're from my ex-fiancé. Her eyebrows rose. The one who, she stopped herself, clearly having heard the full story through hospital gossip channels. Yes. That one. What do you want me to do with them? I considered for a moment. Throwing them away felt wasteful. Keeping them was absolutely not happening. Donate them to the pediatric ward. I said. The kids deserve something beautiful that doesn't come with baggage. Melissa smiled, understanding immediately. Perfect. I'll take them up right now. The image of those expensive roses, Ethan's grand gesture, his attempt to buy forgiveness, sitting in a children's wardroom, bringing joy to sick kids who actually deserved something good, felt like poetic justice. Jordan called that night. You need to see something. He sent me a screenshot. Vanessa's Instagram post, written in that performative vulnerability style influencers perfected. Learning to choose happiness after toxic people try to dim your light. Not everyone can handle a woman who knows her worth. Moving forward, growing, healing. The comments were brutal. You slept with your best friend's fiancé 50 times. Maybe sit this one out. Imagine being this delusional. We were all there at the rehearsal dinner. We know what really happened. Her follower count had dropped from 43,000 to 21,000 in 2 weeks. She's trying to spin this like she's the victim, Jordan said when I called him. Of course she is. Taking responsibility would require actual character. 3 days later, Jordan sent me a news article link. The headline read, Pharmaceutical heir arrested for harassment after violating restraining order. I read it twice, absorbing every detail. Vanessa had filed a restraining order against Ethan after he'd shown up at her workplace 3 times in 1 week, waited outside her apartment building for hours, followed her to her gym. When she'd gotten the order, he'd violated it twice. Once ambushing her outside a coffee shop, once leaving dozens of voice messages that the article described as increasingly unstable and concerning. The article quoted Vanessa telling police they were supposed to be together, and that Ethan had promised her a future. They'd both believed their own lies. Both thought they could build something real on a foundation of betrayal. Now they were destroying each other. Couldn't have happened to better people, Jordan said when I called. I laughed. Actually laughed. It's almost beautiful, isn't it? Watching them implode. Karma working faster than usual. Think he'll actually face consequences? His family's rich enough to make it go away. But the reputation damage. Jordan's voice carried grim satisfaction. That's permanent. Everyone knows now. Everyone saw what he did. I thought about that. About 200 witnesses at the rehearsal dinner. About the phones recording. About the story spreading through social circles like wildfire. Ethan's carefully constructed image, charming, successful, from a good family, had burned to ash in 1 evening. And he'd done it to himself. And he'd done it to himself, I repeated, letting the satisfaction of that truth settle in my chest. Jordan and I sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both of us processing the strange relief that came from watching the people who'd destroyed our lives now destroying each other. I should feel worse about this, Jordan said finally. About taking pleasure in their misery. Why? They earned it. Still, it feels petty. I considered that. Maybe. But I think we're allowed to be petty for a while. We were both planning futures with people who were actively sabotaging those futures behind our backs. We're allowed to feel satisfied when consequences finally catch up to them. Jordan raised his bourbon glass. To consequences. I clinked mine against his. To consequences. Work became my refuge over the following weeks. The ore was the one place where precision still mattered, where broken things could actually be fixed, where my skill had tangible value beyond the wreckage of my personal life. My first surgery after returning full-time was a complex spinal reconstruction. A 19-year-old motorcycle accident victim whose vertebrae had been crushed in 3 places. His ability to walk again depended entirely on my steady hands and focused mind. I scrubbed in at 6 a.m., my mind going quiet the moment I entered the operating room. For the next 11 hours, nothing existed except the surgical field in front of me. Shattered bone structure that needed rebuilding. Each pin placed with microscopic precision. Blood vessels tied off. Tissue carefully repositioned. This was what I was good at. This was what made sense. When I finally stepped out of the OR at 5 p.m., my back was aching and my hands were cramping, but I felt genuinely good for the first time in weeks. Dr. Patricia Chin, my chief of surgery, caught me in the hallway as I was heading to the lounge. Why? A word. I followed her into her office, already knowing what was coming. I heard about the wedding, she said, her voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. I'm sorry. Don't be. I met her eyes directly. Better to find out before than after. She studied me carefully, her gaze clinical and assessing. Are you good to be operating? That was 11 hours straight. You haven't taken time off. You're picking up extra shifts. I'm better operating than anywhere else right now, I said honestly. Surgery is the only thing that makes sense. Patricia nodded slowly. Fair enough. But Maya, take care of yourself. The hospital needs you, but you need to be whole to do this work. Don't use the OR as a place to hide from processing what happened. I wanted to tell her that surgery wasn't hiding. That it was the only place where I felt genuinely in control, where my decisions mattered, where broken things could actually be fixed. But I just nodded. I'll be careful. See that you are. My parents showed up at my apartment that evening without warning, carrying takeout Chinese food and expressions of gentle concern. We wanted to check on you, my mother said, setting containers on my coffee table. You haven't been answering our calls. I've been busy. We know. The hospital told us you've been working double shifts. I grabbed plates from the kitchen, deflecting. Someone has to cover the trauma cases. We ate in silence for a while, me sitting cross-legged on the floor, them on my couch, the awkwardness of the conversation we weren't having filling the space between us. Finally, my mother put down her container. I never liked him. I looked up, surprised. What? Ethan. I never trusted him. You never said anything. She exchanged a glance with my father. You seemed happy. Or at least you seemed like you'd made up your mind. What were we going to say? I put down my lo mein. You could have told me you had concerns. My mother leaned forward, her expression pained. Would you have listened? The question hung in the air. We both knew the answer. No, I wouldn't have. I'd have dismissed their concerns as overprotective parents who couldn't accept that their daughter was making her own choices. There were small things, my mother continued quietly. The way he looked at his phone during family dinners. How he'd suddenly need to take calls outside, always in another room. Once, at your birthday party last year, he disappeared for 40 minutes. When he came back, his shirt was buttoned wrong. The detail landed like a small explosion. My birthday party. 10 months ago. Had he been with Vanessa even then? I told myself I was being paranoid, my mother said. That I was looking for problems because I didn't think he was good enough for you. My father added, we wanted you to be happy. We thought maybe we were just being overprotective. That we couldn't accept our daughter was building her own life separate from us. I felt something crack in my chest. They'd seen warning signs I'd completely missed. Or maybe not missed. Maybe deliberately ignored because acknowledging them would have meant admitting my life wasn't as controlled and perfect as I'd convinced myself it was. I'm sorry we didn't say anything, my mother whispered. Don't be, I said, echoing the words I'd told Patricia. This isn't your fault. His. And mine for not paying attention. It's not your fault, my father said firmly. You trusted someone you had every reason to trust. That's not a character flaw. But it felt like one. Jordan and I started meeting regularly after that, both of us needing someone who understood exactly what we were going through. We'd sit on his balcony with bourbon and notepads, reconstructing the timeline of the affair like detectives working a cold case. The cabin weekend, Jordan said one night, circling a date on his notepad. That was the same weekend Vanessa said she was visiting her sister in Portland. I checked my calendar. And Ethan told me he was home alone, bored, watching Netflix. Jordan shook his head, the pattern becoming clear. Every Thursday evening for 6 months, Vanessa had yoga class. Every Tuesday Ethan had business dinners, I added. Vendor meetings for wedding planning, we said simultaneously, then looked at each other. We'd both been so busy, me with surgical schedules, Jordan with case preparation, that we'd never questioned the convenient patterns, never compared notes, never suspected that our partners' absences might overlap for a reason. There was a weekend in March, Jordan said slowly, where Vanessa said she was at an art consultation in Miami. She sent me photos. Hotel room, the beach, everything. My stomach dropped. Ethan said he was at a pharmaceutical conference in Miami that same weekend. He sent me photos too. We stared at each other. The same lies. The same trip. Probably the same hotel room with photos carefully angled to exclude any evidence of shared occupancy. They planned this, Jordan said quietly. This wasn't just opportunistic encounters. They coordinated schedules, created alibis, constructed an entire parallel reality while we were both completely oblivious. The level of calculation involved was somehow worse than the betrayal itself. 3 days later, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. "Maya, this is Catherine Calloway." I went very still. "Mrs. Calloway. I know you have no reason to speak with me," she said, her formal tone cracking slightly. "But I have information you deserve to know." I waited silent. Catherine took a breath. "Ethan's previous engagement, to Alexandra Pemberton before he met you, ended because I walked in on him with her maid of honor 2 weeks before their wedding." The world seemed to tilt slightly. "What?" "We paid Alexandra's family a significant sum to keep it quiet. To avoid scandal. The Pembertons are old family friends. We couldn't afford the social fallout." I sat down slowly, my legs suddenly unsteady. "I insisted Ethan get therapy," Catherine continued. "That he address whatever compulsion drives this behavior. He refused. Said it was a one-time mistake, that he'd been drunk, that it would never happen again." "But it did," I said quietly. "Yes. When he started dating you, I convinced myself he'd changed. That you were different. That maybe a woman with a serious career, someone who wouldn't worship him or make him the center of her universe, would hold his attention in a way debutantes hadn't." Her voice broke slightly. "I was wrong. And I owe you an apology. I should have warned you. Should have told you about his pattern. But I wanted to believe he could change. That he wasn't." She stopped. "Wasn't what?" I prompted. "Wasn't broken in a way I couldn't fix," she whispered. The revelation crashed over me in waves. This wasn't a mistake. Wasn't a moment of weakness. Wasn't about me being too intense or working too much. This was a pattern. A compulsion. A man who systematically sabotaged relationships at the moment of ultimate commitment, who engineered his own disasters and then blamed the women who loved him for not being enough. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Catherine's voice hardened. "Because he's planning to show up at your hospital again tomorrow with some grand gesture. And because you deserve to know you did nothing wrong. This is who my son is. This is what he does. And I'm ashamed I didn't warn you." I closed my eyes, absorbing the information. "Thank you for telling me. I'm sorry, Maya. Truly. You deserved so much better than my son." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there in my quiet apartment, Catherine's words echoing in my mind. This was a pattern. I wasn't the first. Probably wouldn't be the last. Nothing I'd done or not done would have changed the outcome, because the outcome was inevitable from the moment Ethan proposed. The engagement itself triggered something in him. Some deep-seated fear of commitment that manifested as sabotage. It wasn't about me at all. For the first time since that night in the library, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Not healing. But release. Release from the narrative that I'd somehow caused this. That if I'd been less focused on work, more available, more fun, more spontaneous, it wouldn't have happened. It would have happened regardless. Because this was who Ethan was. And I'd just been the latest in a line of women who'd believed they could be enough for a man who was fundamentally incapable of accepting love. I stared at my phone for a long time after Catherine hung up, her words replaying in my mind. "He's planning to show up at your hospital again tomorrow with some grand gesture." Not if I had anything to say about it. I called the hospital's head of security first thing the next morning. Marcus Webb had been with Metropolitan General for 15 years, a former police officer who'd seen everything and couldn't be rattled. "Dr. Hartwell, what can I do for you?" "There's a situation you should know about," I said, keeping my voice professional. "My ex-fiancé has been attempting to contact me despite being told repeatedly to stop. His mother informed me he's planning to show up at the hospital today with flowers or some other grand gesture." Marcus's tone shifted immediately. "Do you want a restraining order? I can help you file." "Not yet," I interrupted. "But I want clear documentation if he shows up. I want him intercepted before he reaches the surgical wing. And I want him escorted out by security in a way that's visible enough that he understands this isn't romantic persistence. It's harassment." There was a pause, then Marcus said, "I can absolutely arrange that." "What time?" His mother said 2 p.m. "Consider it handled." "And Dr. Hartwell? I'm sorry you're dealing with this." "Thank you, Marcus." At 1:50 p.m. I positioned myself on the second-floor walkway that overlooked the main lobby. I had a surgery scheduled for 3, so I was already in my scrubs, but I wanted to see this. At exactly 2 p.m. the main door slid open and Ethan walked in. He was wearing one of his expensive suits, hair perfectly styled, carrying an enormous bouquet of flowers that must have cost $500 minimum. Red roses, white lilies, some exotic blooms I couldn't identify from this distance. He looked confident, like this was a romantic movie and he was the hero coming to win back his love. He made it maybe 15 feet before 2 security guards intercepted him. I couldn't hear the initial exchange, but I saw Ethan's expression shift from confident to confused. He gestured with the flowers, said something that made one of the guards shake his head firmly. Then Ethan's voice rose, loud enough to carry across the lobby. I just need 5 minutes. I'm trying to apologize to my fiancé. Marcus Webb appeared from a side corridor, his bulk and authority immediately commanding attention. The entire lobby had gone quiet, people stopping mid-stride to watch the scene unfold. Marcus's voice was professionally calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. Sir, you don't have a fiancé. You have a cancelled wedding and a woman who has asked you multiple times to stop contacting her. You are not welcome in this facility. You need to leave now. Ethan's face flushed red. This is insane. I'm trying to make things right. By ignoring her explicit requests to be left alone? Marcus's tone didn't change. That's called harassment, sir. You can leave voluntarily, or we can call the police and have you removed for trespassing. Your choice. I saw the moment Ethan realized this wasn't going his way. His shoulders slumped slightly, the flowers drooping in his grip. Fine, he said, his voice bitter. Give her these. He tried to hand the bouquet to Marcus. No, sir. You can take them with you or leave them here, but we won't be delivering anything to Dr. Hartwell on your behalf. Ethan looked around the lobby, at the nurses watching from the information desk, at the visitors who'd stopped to stare, at the doctors in scrubs observing from the hallway. He was being humiliated. Publicly. Exactly as he'd humiliated me at the rehearsal dinner. He set the flowers on the floor and walked out without another word. Marcus looked up at the second-floor walkway where I was standing. I gave him a thumbs up. He nodded and returned to his office. The flowers sat in the lobby for about 10 minutes before Sarah Chin, the hospital's volunteer coordinator, approached me. Dr. Hartwell, what should we do with those? An idea was already forming. Sarah, you know the charity auction next month? The one that raises money for the trauma unit. Of course. Those flowers cost at least $500. Let's photograph them, create a display card and auction them off. Sarah's eyebrows rose. What kind of display card? I smiled. One that tells the truth. That these flowers were delivered as a grand gesture, by a man who was escorted from the hospital by security after his ex-fiancée declined his repeated attempts at contact following his 6-month affair. That rather than let expensive flowers go to waste, we're auctioning them to benefit trauma care. Sarah's eyes widened, then she started smiling. That's brilliant. Turn his harassment into something that actually helps people. Exactly. We spent 30 minutes crafting the perfect placard, photographing the arrangement, creating a whole display that would appear at next month's charity gala. The text read, "These flowers were delivered as a grand gesture, by a man who was escorted from Metropolitan General by security after his ex-fiancée, a surgeon at this institution, declined his repeated attempts at contact following his 6-month affair with her best friend's girlfriend. Rather than let expensive flowers go to waste, we're auctioning them off to benefit trauma care. Starting bid $50. Sometimes the best revenge is turning unwanted gestures into resources for healing." The auction raised $1,200. I framed the receipt and hung it in my office where I'd see it every day. Jordan came over that evening with a bottle of wine and a manila folder. "I have something for you," he said, spreading documents across my dining table. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, restaurant bills. All from Ethan's corporate credit card, all charged to Callaway Pharmaceuticals. "Where did you get these?" I asked. "I'm a civil rights attorney. I have investigator friends who owe me favors." He pointed at the timeline he'd constructed. "Look at the dates. Every single one of these charges corresponds to a time when Vanessa said she was somewhere else and Ethan claimed he was in business meetings." I leaned over the table studying the evidence. Hotel rooms in Miami, Boston, Philadelphia. Dinners at restaurants that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Weekend trips charged as business expenses. This is corporate fund misuse, Jordan said quietly. He was charging his personal affair to his family company's accounts. That's technically embezzlement. And Vanessa? Jordan pulled out another set of documents. Her billing records from the gallery where she works. Look at the hours she claimed as client consultations. They match perfectly with these hotel dates. Billing fraud. She'd been charging her employer for hours she spent sleeping with Ethan. What do you want to do with this? I asked. Jordan met my eyes. I want to send it to people who should know. Catherine's attorney. Vanessa's employer. Not as a legal complaint, just as information. Let them decide what to do with it. I considered that. We weren't demanding action. Weren't threatening. Just providing documentation of what had actually happened and letting the natural consequences unfold. Do it, I said. Jordan drafted a professional cover letter on his attorney letterhead, explaining that this was information relevant to potential corporate fund misuse and billing fraud, provided for informational purposes only. We sent copies to Catherine's attorney and to Lawrence Brennan, the owner of the boutique gallery that employed Vanessa. Then we waited. The fellowship offer from Zurich had been sitting in my email for 3 weeks. I'd ignored it during the immediate chaos, too overwhelmed to think about the future when my present was imploding. But now, sitting in my apartment with Jordan's documentation spread across my table and the framed auction receipt on my wall, I opened the email and actually read it. 12 months in Switzerland. Working with Dr. Heinrich Müller, one of the world's leading spinal reconstruction specialists. Research opportunities. Teaching. A chance to be Dr. Maya Hartwell, brilliant surgeon in a place where nobody knew about the cancelled wedding or the affair or any of it. I hit reply and typed 3 words. Asterisk, I accept. When? The response came within an hour. Asterisk, can you start March 15th? I checked the date. March 15th was 8 weeks away. It was also, I looked it up, the exact date of Ethan's court hearing for violating Vanessa's restraining order. The symmetry was too perfect to be coincidence. It felt like the universe offering me exactly what I needed exactly when I needed it. I typed back, March 15th works perfectly. I sent Ethan one final email. The only message I'd initiated since walking out of his parents' library. I accepted a fellowship in Switzerland. I'm leaving the country on March 15th. I hope you use this time to get the help Catherine says you've always refused. I hope you figure out why you sabotage every relationship at the moment of commitment. I hope you become the person you pretended to be. But I won't be here to see it. I'm done being a chapter in your pattern. I'm moving forward and you're staying behind with the consequences of your choices. This is the last time you'll hear from me. I hit send then blocked his email address before he could respond. The next 8 weeks passed in a blur of surgery schedules, packing, and watching the consequences unfold from a comfortable distance. Catherine's attorney reviewed Jordan's documentation and apparently presented it to the Callaway Pharmaceuticals board. Ethan was quietly removed from his token position at the company, his name stripped from all official materials. Lawrence Brennan fired Vanessa via email for billing fraud. She posted about it on Instagram, another victim narrative about toxic work environments, but the comments section tore her apart. Jordan texted me updates like they were episodes of a soap opera. Ethan had moved back in with his parents. Vanessa was working as a barista. The restraining order hearing resulted in mandatory anger management classes and a formal warning that any future violations would result in jail time. I felt nothing watching their lives implode. No satisfaction. No vindication. Just a distant acknowledgement that consequences had finally caught up to choices. March 15th arrived cold and clear. Jordan drove me to the airport at 5 a.m., my entire life packed into 3 suitcases and a carry-on. Think you'll come back? He asked as we stood in the departures terminal. I considered the question. Eventually. But right now I need to be somewhere where my past doesn't exist. Where I can just be Dr. Maya Hartwell, brilliant surgeon. Nothing more complicated than that. Jordan pulled me into a hug. Call me when you land. And Maya? Yeah. You didn't just survive this. You won. I smiled against his shoulder. So did you? Yeah, he said quietly. I think we did. I walked through security without looking back. Boarded my flight. Found my seat. And as the plane lifted off, leaving everything behind, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Free. The word echoed in my mind as the plane leveled off, the city disappearing beneath clouds, everything I was leaving behind becoming smaller and smaller until it vanished completely. I leaned my head against the window and closed my eyes, feeling the tension I'd been carrying for months finally start to release from my shoulders. Switzerland was waiting. A fresh start. A place where nobody knew about Ethan or Vanessa or the wedding that never happened. A place where I could just be Dr. Maya Hartwell again. Nothing more, nothing less. Zurich was exactly what I needed. The fellowship placed me at University Hospital, working alongside Dr. Heinrich Müller, one of the world's leading spinal reconstruction specialists. The work was intense. 12-hour days in the OR, complex cases that required every bit of skill I'd developed over my career, research that consumed my mind completely. My colleagues knew me only as the American surgeon with steady hands and an impressive publication record. They didn't know about my personal life because I didn't have one to discuss. I worked. I studied. I perfected techniques. I lost myself in the precision of surgery. But the fellowship program had one requirement I hadn't anticipated: mandatory therapy for all international participants dealing with life transitions. Dr. Anna Müller, no relation to Heinrich, was a clinical psychologist in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that saw far too much. Our first session, she asked, "Why are you here in Zurich, Dr. Hartwell?" "For the fellowship. To work with Dr. Müller on spinal reconstruction." "No," she interrupted gently. "Why are you really here?" I was silent for a long moment. "I'm running away," I finally admitted. "From what?" "From a wedding that didn't happen. From a fiancé who spent 6 months sleeping with my best friend's girlfriend. From the humiliation of discovering them hours before I was supposed to get married." Dr. Müller nodded, making a note. "And what are you running toward?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't understand. Running away from something is different than running toward something. Which are you doing?" I didn't have an answer. Over the following months, Dr. Müller asked questions that landed like surgical incisions, cutting through defenses I'd built over years. Why did you choose emotional detachment as your primary coping mechanism? When did you start believing that needing people made you weak? Can you identify the moment you decided control was more important than vulnerability? Slowly, painfully, I started seeing patterns I'd never examined. I'd built my entire identity around control. Around being the person who didn't need anyone, who could handle anything, who never let emotion compromise precision. That control had made me an exceptional surgeon. But it had also made me blind. I'd wanted Ethan to be who I needed him to be: supportive, understanding, content with my career-focused life. So I'd dismissed every piece of evidence that contradicted that narrative. The way he looked at his phone. His convenient need for space. The small inconsistencies that I'd catalogued and then ignored. "You're very good at seeing what's broken in other people's bodies," Dr. Müller observed during one session. "But you've trained yourself not to see what's broken in your own life until the damage is catastrophic." He was right. I'd ignored hairline fractures until they became complete breaks. And then I'd been shocked when everything shattered. "What Ethan did was entirely his choice," Dr. Müller clarified. "You are not responsible for his betrayal. But you are responsible for how you responded to warning signs. For the patterns you've developed that prioritize control over connection." It was the hardest work I'd ever done. Harder than medical school. Harder than residency. Harder than any surgery. Because surgery had rules. Protocols. Clear steps from diagnosis to treatment to recovery. This was messy. More uncertain. Required sitting with discomfort instead of cutting it away. 6 months into the fellowship, Jordan texted, "Coming to visit. Book me a couch." He arrived in September with a suitcase, wine, and the kind of easy companionship I desperately needed without realizing it. We spent evenings on my apartment's small balcony overlooking the city, finally talking about things we'd both been avoiding. "Do you think we'll ever trust anyone again?" Jordan asked one night, both of us on our second glass of wine. I considered the question carefully. "I think we'll trust differently. More carefully. With more attention to evidence instead of hoping people are who they claim to be." Jordan nodded slowly. "That sounds exhausting." "It is. But so is being blindsided by a 6-month affair." He laughed, but it was hollow. "Fair point." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching lights come on across the city as evening deepened. Vanessa lost her job, Jordan said eventually. The gallery owner found out she'd been billing client hours while conducting her affair. Fired her for fraud. I waited for some feeling to surface. Satisfaction maybe. Vindication. Nothing came. Just empty acknowledgement that consequences had occurred. And Ethan? Jordan smiled grimly. His father removed him from the company board. Catherine gave him an ultimatum: get serious therapy or get cut off from the family money. He chose therapy. Think it'll help? Honestly, I think he's just performing compliance until everyone stops paying attention. Then he'll go back to being exactly who he's always been. Probably true. People didn't fundamentally change just because they'd faced consequences. They changed because they genuinely wanted to be different. And Ethan had never struck me as someone capable of that kind of introspection. I met someone, Jordan said quietly. Her name's Rebecca. She's a public defender. Brilliant, honest to a fault, calls me on my stuff in a way I desperately need. I smiled genuinely for the first time in the conversation. That's good, Jordan. That's really good. We're taking it incredibly slowly. I'm terrified of missing red flags again. Of being so desperate to believe in someone that I ignore evidence right in front of me. I understand that completely. He looked at me. What about you? Anyone interesting in Switzerland? I shook my head. Not ready yet. Maybe not for a long time. Right now I'm focused on work. On rebuilding my sense of who I am outside of relationships, outside of other people's perceptions. Is it working? It's lonely sometimes, I admitted. But it's also clarifying. I'm learning things about myself I never would have examined if my life hadn't completely imploded. Jordan raised his glass. To implosions that force growth. I clinked mine against his. To growth we wouldn't have chosen but needed anyway. 3 months before my fellowship ended, a letter arrived forwarded through the hospital's international mail system. Catherine Calloway's elegant handwriting on expensive stationery. I almost threw it away without reading it. But something made me open it. Dear Maya, I debated whether to send this, but I believe you deserve to understand what therapy has revealed about my son. I read slowly, absorbing every word. Ethan's pattern stemmed from fear of becoming like his father. Emotionally unavailable, trapped in a loveless marriage maintained purely for social appearances. His therapist believed he subconsciously engineered affairs that forced relationship endings, preventing him from entering marriages he feared would replicate his parents' cold dysfunction. This doesn't excuse his behavior or minimize the harm he caused you, Catherine wrote. But I thought you should know his betrayal wasn't about you being too intense or too focused on your career. It was about his own inability to accept love, commitment, or the vulnerability required for genuine partnership. I read the letter 3 times, feeling something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Ethan didn't deserve that and I wasn't interested in offering it. But release. Release from the narrative that I'd somehow caused this. That if I'd been different, better, more available, it wouldn't have happened. It would have happened regardless. Because this was who Ethan was. A man incapable of accepting love even when it was freely offered. And that had nothing to do with me. I returned to the States in March, exactly 1 year after I'd left. Jordan met me at the airport with coffee and the kind of hug that said everything words couldn't. Welcome home, Maya. Metropolitan General welcomed me back with a promotion I hadn't expected. Director of Orthopedic Trauma. Youngest person ever to hold the position. My first day back, walking through the surgical wing in my white coat, I felt genuinely good to be home. But I was different now. Still precise. Still brilliant. Still exceptional at my work. But no longer using the OR as a place to hide from emotional complexity. No longer equating control with strength or vulnerability with weakness. I'd learned to sit with uncertainty. To acknowledge when I didn't have answers. To accept that some things couldn't be controlled or fixed or predicted. I started dating again. Carefully, slowly. Jordan's Rebecca helped vet potential partners with the brutal honesty of someone who'd also been burned. I went to therapy weekly. Not because I was broken but because I was committed to staying whole. And sometimes when I was in the OR reconstructing a patient's shattered spine, carefully setting fractures and knowing that proper healing would make the bone stronger than it had been originally, I thought about my own fractures. The breaks that had felt catastrophic but had ultimately made me more resilient. More aware. More genuinely myself than I'd been before everything shattered. I thought about Ethan sometimes. Wondered if he'd actually changed or if he was just better at hiding his patterns. But mostly I didn't think about him at all. Because he'd become what he'd always been. A chapter in my story. Not the whole narrative. Not even close. I was Dr. Maya Hartwell. Brilliant surgeon. Director of orthopedic trauma. Someone who'd survived betrayal and built something stronger from the wreckage. And that was enough. More than enough. That's how you survive betrayal. Not by avoiding all future breaks, but by learning to set your own fractures properly, giving them time to heal and trusting that what emerges can be stronger, wiser, and more authentically whole than what existed before the break. Some things once shattered should stay broken. But some people once broken can rebuild themselves into something better than they were before. I'd become the latter. And I'd never been more proud of who I was. If this story of surgical precision revenge had you hooked from start to finish, smash that like button right now. My favorite part was when Maya turned Ethan's expensive flowers into a charity auction with that brutal placard explaining exactly why they were rejected. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more epic revenge stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss another upload.